I walked out my back door at 6:47 a.m. with coffee in hand, planning to skim leaves from the pool. A 6-foot chain link fence surrounded the entire pool area. A padlock hung from the gate. A laminated sign, Meadowbrook Community Pool, HOA members only. Someone had fenced off my $80,000 saltwater pool without my permission, on my property. The HOA president called within the hour. The pool is visible from 17 homes. It's been designated as a shared recreational facility. If you interfere with resident access, we'll pursue legal action. What Richard didn't know was that he'd filed a fraudulent master plan 3 years earlier showing a pool on my property, before I'd even built it. Conspired with the developer to defraud homeowners, collected $72,000 in fake pool fees, embezzled $60,000. He thought claiming my pool as community property and threatening lawsuits would force me to accept it. Thought visibility from his windows gave him ownership rights. He was wrong. By the time the judge sentenced him to 4 years in prison, it was too late to undo what came next. Before we get started, let me know where you're watching from today, and be sure to hit like and subscribe for more great stories like this. I found the fence at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I'd walked out my back door with coffee in hand, planning to skim leaves from the pool before work, and stop dead on my patio. A 6-foot chain link fence now surrounded my entire pool area. The $80,000 saltwater pool I'd spent 6 months saving for and 3 months building. A padlock hung from the gate. Now a laminated sign was zip-tied to the fence. Meadowbrook Community Pool, show, members only, hours, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. I stood there for a full 30 seconds, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. Someone had fenced off my pool, on my property, without my permission. I walked to the gate and pulled on the lock, solid, commercial grade. I looked through the fence at my pool, my custom-tiled, LED-lit, saltwater pool that I'd financed and built myself, now imprisoned behind chain link like it belonged to someone else. A woman's voice called from the other side of the fence. "Excuse me, the pool doesn't open until 10. I turned. A woman in her 40s stood at the far corner of my yard, holding a pool bag and towels. She wasn't on my property. She was standing in the easement pathway that ran along the back property line. Yeah, the one the HOA had installed 2 years ago, connecting all the Meadowbrook Estates homes. "This is my pool," I said. "On my property." She looked confused. "This is the Meadowbrook Community Pool. It says so right on the sign. I built this pool. I paid for it. It's mine. But it's designated as a shared amenity. The HOA sent out an email last week about the new pool access schedule." She pulled out her phone and showed me a message from Meadowbrook HOA Board. Great news. The community pool is now open for resident use. Access cards available at next board meeting. I walked over to her, staying on my side of the property line. "I don't know what the HOA told you, but this pool is on my private property. I'm not part of your HOA. This is my pool. That doesn't make sense. Nay, why would they put up a fence and schedule if it's not a community pool?" That's exactly what I'm about to find out. Let me explain how I ended up in this situation. I bought my house 8 years ago, a 3-bedroom ranch on 2 acres, in what was then a quiet semi-rural area outside town. The property had mature trees, a large backyard, and privacy. It was perfect. No HOA, no restrictions beyond county zoning. Just a simple house on a simple lot. 3 years ago, a developer bought the surrounding farmland and built Meadowbrook Estates, a planned community of 180 homes with an HOA governing everything from fence heights to mailbox colors. They built right up to my property lines on 3 sides. Suddenly, my quiet 2-acre lot was surrounded by quarter-acre suburban homes with identical landscaping. The developer had approached me multiple times, offering to buy my property so they could include it in the development. I'd refused every time. My property predated their development. I had no interest in joining an HOA or selling. They'd built around me, leaving my 2 acres as an island of non-HOA property in the middle of their community. It was awkward. Their homes looked into my yard, their walking paths ran along my property line, but it was legal and I had no obligation to accommodate them. 6 months ago, I decided to build a pool. I'd wanted one for years, and I'd finally saved the $80,000 for a custom saltwater pool with LED lighting, built-in seating, and high-end tile work. I'd pulled all the required county permits, hired a licensed contractor, and built it in my backyard. The location was perfect. Flat ground, good sun exposure, close to the house. The fact that it was visible from some of the Meadowbrook homes behind me was irrelevant. It was my property. I could build whatever I wanted on it, as long as I followed county code. The pool was finished 3 months ago. It was beautiful. I'd been using it almost daily, swimming laps in the morning, floating in the evening, hosting friends on weekends. It was everything I'd hoped for, until this morning when someone had fenced it off and declared it community property. I went inside and called the number listed on the HOA sign. A woman answered on the third ring. Meadowbrook HOA, this is Patricia. My name is James Carter. I own the property at 487 Maple Road, the one that's not part of your HOA. Someone from your organization installed a fence around my pool overnight. I want it removed immediately. There was a pause. Let me transfer you to our president, Richard Klein. Hold music played for 2 minutes. Then a man's voice, confident and dismissive. Mr. Carter, this is Richard Klein, HOA president. I understand you have questions about the community pool. It's not a community pool. It's my pool, on my property, and I want your fence removed today. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding about the nature of that amenity. There's no misunderstanding. I built the pool 6 months ago with my own money. It's on my property. You had no right to fence it. The pool is visible from 17 Meadowbrook homes. Its presence significantly impacts our property values and community character. As such, it's been designated as a shared recreational facility in our updated master plan. I was quiet for a moment, processing the audacity of what he'd just said. You're claiming my pool is community property because your members can see it. Because it functions as a community amenity. Our residents purchased homes with the understanding that Meadowbrook would provide certain lifestyle benefits. Your pool fulfills that expectation. I didn't agree to provide anything to your community. I'm not in your HOA. Your property is surrounded by Meadowbrook estates. You benefit from our maintained pathways, our landscaping standards, our overall property values. It's only fair that you contribute amenities in return. Contribute? I paid $80,000 for that pool. You contributed nothing. We've contributed the fence to ensure safe. I organized access. We'll be maintaining the pool going forward. Chemicals, cleaning, repairs. All costs will be covered by HOA dues. You won't have to worry about anything. I don't want you maintaining it. I want you off my property. I'm afraid that's not possible. The designation is final. If you interfere with resident access, we'll pursue legal action. Have a good day, Mr. Carter. He hung up. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the phone, my brain struggling to catch up with what had just happened. The HOA president had just told me they were seizing my pool because it was visible from their homes, and he'd threatened to sue me if I objected. I walked back outside. 3 more Meadowbrook residents had gathered at the fence, waiting for the 10 a.m. opening time. They were chatting, excited, each treating my pool like it was a public amenity they'd been promised. "Excuse me," I called out. "This is private property. That pool is mine. You can't use it." A man in his 50s looked annoyed. "The HOA sent out access information last week. We're allowed to be here. You're on the easement path, which is fine, but the pool is on my private property, and I didn't give anyone permission to use it." "Then why did the HOA install the fence and signage?" "I don't know, but I'm about to find out." I went inside and called a property attorney I'd used for the house purchase years ago. Marcus Webb answered on the second ring. "Marcus, I need legal help. My HOA, well, not my HOA, the HOA that built around me, just fenced off my pool and declared it community property." There was a pause. "They did what?" I explained the fence, the sign, the conversation with Richard Klein, the claim that my pool was a community amenity because it was visible from HOA homes. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "That's not how property law works. They can't claim ownership of your pool just because they can see it. Do you have documentation that you own the property and built the pool? Property deed, building permits, contractor invoices, everything. And you're definitely not part of the HOA? You never signed any agreements?" "Never. My property predates their development. I refused to join when they were being built. Then this is trespassing and possibly theft of property use. They have no legal right to fence your pool or allow access to it. How much did the pool cost? $80,000. So they're claiming an $80,000 asset as community property without compensation, without permission, and without any legal basis. That's bold. He paused. What do you want to do? I want the fence gone, today. You have the right to remove it yourself. It's on your property without permission. But if you do, they'll probably sue you. The question is whether you want to force the confrontation now or wait for legal process. How long would legal process take? Weeks minimum to get a court order. Meanwhile, they're using your pool and establishing a pattern of access that they'll claim shows implied permission. So if I wait, they'll argue I gave them permission by not stopping them immediately. Possibly, some judges would see your delay as acquiescence. Then I'm removing the fence today. I'd recommend documenting everything first. Photos, videos, witnesses. Once you remove it, they'll claim you destroyed their property. We need evidence it was your property they fenced without permission. I spent the next hour documenting everything. Photos of the fence from every angle. Video of the sign claiming it was a community pool. Video of HOA residents gathering to wait for access. Photos of my property deed showing clear ownership. Photos of the building permits showing I'd legally built the pool. At 9:55 a.m., Richard Klein himself arrived carrying a pool access card and wearing swim trunks under his clothes. He walked up to the fence gate and pulled out keys. I stepped out my back door. "Don't touch that lock," he turned. "Mr. Carter, I thought we settled this on the phone." "We didn't settle anything. You declared my property yours. That's not a settlement. The pool has been designated as a community amenity. I'm here to open it for resident access as scheduled." He inserted the key into the lock. "If you open that gate and step onto my property, I'm calling the police for trespassing." "You can't trespass on community property." "It's not community property. It's my property. And if you don't remove this fence immediately, I will." Richard smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "If you tamper with HOA property, we'll file charges for vandalism and sue you for damages. The fence costs $3,000 to install. Can you afford to replace it? Can you afford to defend a lawsuit for trespassing, theft of property use, and conversion of an $80,000 asset?" His smile faded. "We're trying to work with you here. The pool benefits everyone, including you. We'll maintain it, insure it, manage access. All you have to do is stop being selfish and let the community enjoy it. Get off my property. I'm on the easement path. I have every right to be here. Then stay on the easement. Don't touch my pool, my fence, or my property." He looked at me for a long moment, then turned to the 8 residents who'd gathered. "Mr. Carter is being difficult about sharing community amenities. We'll need to pursue this through legal channels. I'll send out an update later today." They left, grumbling about selfish neighbors and community spirit. I called Marcus back. The HOA president just tried to open the pool himself. He had keys to the lock they installed. He's treating this like it's already decided. That's because he's establishing facts on the ground. If he gets residents using the pool regularly, he'll argue they relied on access and you can't revoke it. You need to stop this now. I'm cutting the fence down. Do it. Document everything. I'll prepare for the lawsuit they're going to file. I went to my garage and got bolt cutters. I documented the fence again. Photos showing it was on my property, installed without permission, with no legal basis. Then I cut the lock off the gate. Inside, I found pool cleaning supplies I hadn't purchased, lane dividers I didn't own, and a laminated rules sign. No diving, no running, no glass containers, no children under 12 without supervision. They'd prepared to operate my pool like a public facility. I spent the next 2 hours cutting down the entire fence. Every post, every section of chain link, every piece of hardware. I stacked it neatly at the edge of my property near the easement path where Richard could see it. By noon, my pool was free again, mine again. I sat on my patio and looked at it. The water sparkled in the sunlight. LED lights glowed beneath the surface. The custom tile work I'd spent weeks choosing reflected the sun in shades of blue and turquoise. My pool, my property, my investment. At 1:30 p.m., a courier arrived with a letter. I knew what it was before I opened it. Meadowbrook Estates, HOA, cease and desist. You have illegally destroyed HOA property. fence and signage valued at $3,200. You have interfered with resident access to designated community amenities. You have violated the Meadowbrook Master Plan designation of your pool as a shared recreational facility. Remove all barriers to pool access immediately. Or restore the fence you destroyed. Cease interference with community access. Failure to comply will result in legal action, including but not limited to lawsuit for damages, injunction compelling access, liens against your property for repair costs and legal fees. Signed, Richard Klein, HOA President. I called Marcus. They're threatening to sue me for cutting down the fence they illegally installed on my property. Let them sue. We'll countersue for trespassing, attempted theft of property use, and harassment. What's your pool worth if you had to sell it? I paid $80,000 to build it. I'd estimate $60,000 to $70,000 current value. Then they're attempting to steal a $70,000 asset. We'll be asking for triple damages plus attorney fees. Let them throw the first punch. That evening, I sat on my patio watching the sunset reflect off my pool, the pool I'd worked years to afford, the pool I'd spent months designing and building, the pool the HOA had tried to steal in one morning with a fence and a sign. My phone buzzed. An email from Meadowbrook HOA Board to all residents. Unfortunately, the property owner at 487 Maple Road has refused to cooperate with community access to the pool amenity. He has vandalized HOA property, fence and signage, and threatened residents. We are pursuing legal action to restore community access to this shared facility. In the meantime, please respect his property boundaries while we resolve this matter through the courts. Within minutes, my phone started ringing. Angry calls from Meadowbrook residents I'd never met. Oh, you destroyed community property. We have kids who need a place to swim. You're ruining our property values. I stopped answering after the fifth call. This wasn't over. Richard had made that clear. The HOA was going to fight for my pool, claiming it was theirs because it was visible from their homes. But I'd fought back once today. I'd fight back again tomorrow. The pool was mine, and I'd defend it. Richard Klein looked directly at my security camera, smiled, and dove into my pool. It was 6:15 p.m., 3 days after I'd installed 6 high-definition cameras covering every angle of my property. He'd walked through my back gate, stripped off his shirt, and jumped in like he owned the place. I watched the footage on my phone from inside my house. He swam 20 laps, got out, toweled off using a towel he'd brought, and left through the same gate. He knew the cameras were there. He'd seen me install them, and he'd trespassed anyway. This had started 3 days earlier when the HOA's lawsuit arrived. Marcus had called me at 7 a.m. They filed. Meadowbrook HOA is suing you for $12,000, $3,200 for the fence you destroyed, $5,000 in legal fees, and $3,800 for interference with community access to shared amenities. They're also asking for an injunction compelling you to allow resident access to your pool. Can they actually win? Not if the judge understands property law. But Richard's framing this as though you agreed to share the pool and then reneged. We'll file a counterclaim today. Trespassing, attempted theft of property use, conversion, and harassment. We're asking for $100,000 in damages plus attorney fees. $100,000? Your pool cost $80,000. They attempted to seize it permanently. That's theft. We're also asking for punitive damages because their conduct was willful and malicious. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. Marcus sent me a formal letter to post. Private property, no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted. I laminated it and posted copies around the pool area. The next morning, I found the signs torn down and thrown in my pool. The police officer who responded was sympathetic, but limited. This is a civil property dispute. If you want to press trespassing charges, you need evidence of who did it. I'd recommend security cameras. That's when I installed the 6 cameras, covering the pool from every angle, the back gate, the side yards, and the property line. High definition, night vision, motion activated, uploading to the cloud automatically. Which is how I caught Richard's first violation at 6:15 p.m. that same day. I sent the footage to Marcus immediately. I have Richard on camera trespassing. Send me everything. We're adding it to the counterclaim. The next morning, the HOA's attorney sent a letter. Your client is interfering with established community access to a shared amenity. The Meadowbrook Master Plan, filed with the county in 2021, designates all visible recreational facilities within the Meadowbrook boundary area as community assets. Your client's pool falls within this designation. I called Marcus. They're claiming the master plan designates my pool as community property. A master plan can't grant rights over property they don't own. But I need to see it. Get a copy from the county. I drove to the county planning office that afternoon. The clerk pulled up the Meadowbrook Estates master plan filed in March 2021, 3 years ago. The plan showed the entire development with my 2-acre property in the center, and in the middle of my property, a blue rectangle labeled Community Pool. When was this filed? I asked. March 2021, 3 years ago. I built my pool 6 months ago. How could their master plan show a pool that didn't exist yet? She looked closer. That's a good question. I stared at the document. The blue rectangle on my property, filed 3 years before I'd even started planning the pool, before I'd saved the money, before I'd hired the contractor. They planned this, I said quietly. They knew my property was in the middle of their development. They knew I had the only large backyard that could fit a pool. They put a fake pool on their master plan, sold homes promising pool access, and waited for me to build one so they could claim it. The clerk was quiet. You should really talk to your attorney about this. I took photos of every page, the master plan, the blue rectangle, the date, March 2021. Richard hadn't improvised when he'd fenced my pool. This had been his plan for 3 years. I sent the photos to Marcus. He called back within an hour. This is fraud. They filed a master plan showing a pool on your property 3 years before you built it. They always planned to claim whatever you built. We're amending the counterclaim. Meanwhile, the cameras kept recording. Yes, over the next week, Richard trespassed 6 times. 4 HOA residents entered to swim. A woman hosted a child's birthday party at my pool. Richard arrived with a pool cleaning service. The pool service incident particularly worried me. I watched Richard supervise 2 workers adding chemicals to my pool. When they finished, Richard handed them a check. I tested the water that evening. pH levels were too high, chlorine too low. Whatever they had added wasn't maintaining the pool. It was slowly damaging it. I called Marcus. Richard's maintenance is actually harming the pool. The chemistry is wrong. Add it to the contempt filing. He's not just trespassing, he's damaging your property. The preliminary hearing happened 2 weeks later. Judge Patricia Morrison presided, a woman in her 60s with a reputation for tough property law rulings. The HOA's attorney, Stephen Phillips, presented first. Your Honor, the defendant destroyed $3,200 worth of HOA property and violated the Meadowbrook Master Plan, which designates visible recreational facilities as shared assets. Judge Morrison looked at him. Who owns the property where the pool is located? The defendant, Your Honor, but is the defendant a member of the HOA? No, but the pool is visible from 17 homes. Visibility doesn't create ownership. Unless you can show me a recorded easement or agreement granting the HOA rights to that pool, your client is trespassing. Do you have such a document? Phillips hesitated. The master plan constitutes. The master plan is an internal HOA document. Do you have an easement? Anything signed by the defendant? No, Your Honor. Marcus stood. Your Honor, the HOA installed a fence on my client's property without permission, declared his $80,000 pool community property, and has been trespassing repeatedly. We have video evidence of the HOA president using the pool 6 times in 2 weeks. Judge Morrison reviewed the footage. Her expression grew stern. Mr. Phillips, your client has been trespassing despite being explicitly told to stay off. I'm issuing a preliminary order. The HOA and all members are prohibited from accessing the defendant's property pending trial. Any violations will result in contempt charges. Do I make myself clear? Your Honor, the community needs to respect property rights. Order is granted. Stay off his property. We left the courthouse and I shook Marcus's hand. Thank you. Don't celebrate yet. Richard just lost in front of a judge. He's going to be angry. That evening, the Meadowbrook HOA sent an email to all residents. Due to legal interference by the property owner at 487 Maple Road, community access to the pool has been temporarily restricted by court order. The HOA board has authorized a special assessment of $50 per month per household to fund legal costs and future pool maintenance once access is restored. $50 per month times 180 homes equaled $9,000 per month, over $100,000 per year, for a pool they didn't own and couldn't access. I forwarded it to Marcus. This is fraud. We're adding it to the counterclaim. My neighbor Amy sent me screenshots from the HOA Facebook group. The community was fracturing. Amy counted. 67 residents out of 180 had commented questioning the fee. More than a third of the community was pushing back. Why are we paying for a pool we can't use? Has anyone verified we have legal rights to this pool? I'm not paying $600 per year for something the court says we can't access. 2 days later, my doorbell rang. 3 Meadowbrook residents I'd never met stood on my porch. Mr. Carter, I'm Jennifer Walsh. Can we talk about the $50 monthly fee? We're trying to understand what's actually happening. I invited them in. Jennifer, her husband Mike, and a third resident named Tom sat in my living room while I explained everything: the fence, Richard's claim, the master plan filed 3 years before I'd built the pool. Jennifer looked disturbed. He told us you'd agreed to share the pool and then changed your mind. I never agreed. I built this pool with my own money on my property, where Richard fenced it without permission. Tom showed me an email from 2022. Richard sent this to new residents. It says Meadowbrook amenities include community pool access. He was promising us a pool you hadn't even built yet. Look at the master plan date, 2021. He created a fake amenity, sold you homes promising access, and waited for me to build something so he could claim it. Jennifer looked sick. We're paying $50 per month for a pool we can't access, and you never agreed to share. That's fraud. Talk to your neighbors, I said. I asked Amy about Richard that evening. How many properties does he own in Meadowbrook? 4. His primary residence plus 3 rental properties he bought as investments. He's one of the largest property owners. I heard him say the pool visibility increased his home's value by $40,000. Multiply that by 4 properties, and he's protecting $160,000 in equity. That explained his desperation, not just entitled, protecting a $160,000 investment. But Richard wasn't done. Over the next 6 days, the cameras caught Richard trespassing 3 more times, 2 board members using the pool, 7 residents accessing after dark, Richard with the pool service again. Every violation was documented and sent to Marcus. He's building a pattern of access, Marcus said, trying to establish regular use for some kind of implied easement claim. Can that work? Not in 6 days, but Richard doesn't understand property law. Marcus called Sunday evening. We have 23 videos of HOA members violating Judge Morrison's order. Richard appears in 8. What happens if she finds him in contempt? Fines, definitely, but possibly jail if she thinks he's deliberately flouting her authority. Contempt is serious. And Richard didn't just violate once. He violated repeatedly, brazenly on camera. We're going to ask for attorney fees, punitive damages, and a permanent injunction. Permanent? Meaning they can never claim rights to your pool again, ever. The case ends, you win, they're permanently barred from arguing about it. That's what I wanted, total victory. I sat on my patio that evening watching the sunset, my pool, my property. Richard had ignored a direct court order, charged residents fraudulent fees, and continued treating my pool as community property. Tomorrow, he'd face the consequences. There were 53 people in my backyard when I got home from work. I turned into my driveway at 5:45 p.m. and saw cars parked along the street, dozens of them with Meadowbrook parking permits. I heard music, laughter, and splashing from behind my house. I walked through my side gate and stopped. My pool was full of people, children jumping off the sides, adults lounging on floaties, a portable speaker playing music, coolers stacked near my patio. Someone had set up a folding table with snacks. I stood there frozen, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. This was my pool, the one I'd saved 6 months for, designed myself, built with my contractor. The pool I swam laps in every morning, the pool I'd fought for in court, and 53 strangers were treating it like a public park. A child jumped off the side, splashing water onto my custom tile. 2 teenagers were playing chicken in the deep end. It is an elderly man floated on an inflatable raft shaped like a pizza slice in my pool. The audacity was breathtaking. Richard hadn't just trespassed. He'd organized a mass trespass, invited the entire community, and turned my property into a block party. Richard Klein stood at the center of it all, grilling hamburgers on a portable grill he'd brought. He saw me and smiled. "James, glad you could make it to Community Pool Day. Want a burger? Everyone off my property, now." The music stopped. People turned to look at me. Some looked confused, others defiant. Richard kept smiling. "We're exercising our community access rights. This is private property. You're trespassing. Get out or I'm calling the police. Go ahead, call them." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. I have 50-plus trespassers on my property refusing to leave. It took 20 minutes for 2 patrol cars to arrive. The officers surveyed the scene. "Sir, these people are on your property without permission?" the first officer asked. "Yes. They broke into my pool, filled it, and are hosting a party." The officer turned to Richard. "Do you have written permission from the property owner?" "The master plan? That's not what I asked. Written permission from this man?" Richard's smile faded. "The court will resolve ownership. Until then, this is his property. You're leaving now, or we're arresting people." The crowd started moving, slowly, reluctantly. Parents pulling children from the pool. Richard was the last to leave. "This isn't over," he said as he passed me. "I know. Let me explain how we got here. This was Thursday evening. If the contempt hearing that was supposed to end everything had happened Monday morning, 3 days ago, it hadn't ended anything. It had made Richard desperate. Judge Morrison had not been pleased. Marcus presented 23 videos of HOA members violating her order. Richard appeared in 8 of them, including footage from the night before, showing him swimming laps at 11 p.m. "Mr. Klein, I issued a clear order. You violated it repeatedly, brazenly, and on camera. Do you have an explanation?" Richard's attorney tried to argue. "Your Honor, my client believed the order didn't apply to brief maintenance checks. Swimming laps is not maintenance. I'm finding you in contempt of court. You're fined $5,000. If you violate my order one more time, I'm holding you in jail until trial. Do you understand?" Richard's face went red. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm expanding the injunction. Not only are you prohibited from accessing the property, you're prohibited from organizing or facilitating any access by HOA members. I'm also awarding the plaintiff $8,000 in attorney fees." We'd left victorious. I thought it was over. That evening, I found my pool drained, completely empty. 8,000 gallons gone, flooding my yard. Richard had been on my property at 2 a.m. The cameras showed him, though the angle didn't capture exactly what he'd done. I refilled the pool the next morning. By evening, it was drained again. This time, the cameras caught Richard clearly. 3:17 a.m., climbing over my fence, opening the drainage valve. I called the police. "That's trespassing and property damage. We can press charges, but meanwhile, he could do it again. 8, you could drain it yourself and cover it." I drained the pool that afternoon and secured a heavy-duty tarp over it. If Richard wanted access, he'd have to work for it. The next morning, the morning of Community Pool Day, the tarp was still secure. I went to work thinking I'd stopped him. I was wrong. Richard had organized 53 people to remove the tarp, refill the pool, and swim anyway. After the police cleared everyone out, I assessed the damage. Muddy footprints, trash everywhere. My pool full again. They'd spent hours filling it. A bill was taped to my door. Meadowbrook HOA, water usage invoice, $2,000 for water, used to refill community pool, payment due within 30 days. They'd billed me for water they'd used to trespass. I photographed it and sent it to Marcus. His response was immediate. "Don't pay a cent. That's evidence of fraud. They're billing you for trespassing. I'm adding it to our damages claim. They now owe you $2,000 plus the water costs." 2 weeks later, I received a past due notice. I filed it with the evidence and never paid. Jennifer Walsh called that evening. "I'm sorry about what happened today. Richard organized it without board approval. There's a faction trying to recall him." "What about the $50 monthly pool fee?" "That's the bigger problem. We've collected it for 2 months, $18,000. But no one knows where the money's going. Richard won't show the board the account details." "How long has Richard been charging fees?" 2 months officially, but let me ask around." She called back an hour later. James, Richard started collecting voluntary pool fund contributions 10 months ago. He said the HOA was planning to build a pool. At least 80 homeowners contributed $50 per month. Over 10 months, that's $40,000 in voluntary contributions. Add the mandatory fees, and Richard has collected $58,000 total. For a pool that doesn't exist and he doesn't own. Exactly. And no one knows where it went. I called Marcus. Richard collected at least $58,000 in pool fees for 10 months. That's fraud. We need to subpoena the HOA's financial records. The subpoena went out the next morning. The financial records arrived a week later. Marcus called after reviewing them. This is worse than we thought. Richard collected $72,000 over 10 months. Only $12,000 was actually spent on anything pool-related. What was it spent on? Lawn service for Richard's personal properties, pool supplies delivered to Richard's house, a $3,000 payment to a consulting company that doesn't exist. The rest, $60,000, is just gone. Can you trace any of it? Some. We found $8,000 in cash withdrawals Richard made personally from the HOA account to his personal account, supposedly for reimbursement with no receipts. Another $15,000 went to Klein Property Services, Richard's personal LLC for his rental properties. He was paying himself to consult on pool matters. The rest, cash withdrawals with Greg's signature marked as supplies with no receipts. So Richard stole at least $23,000 that we can prove. That's the floor. The real number is probably much higher. What about Greg Foster? Was he stealing too, or just incompetent? Hard to say. Now, some transactions have his signature, including the fake consulting payment. But other withdrawals were cash taken by Richard with notes saying, Treasurer Approval Verbal. Either Greg was actively helping Richard steal, or he was signing things without reading them. But legally it doesn't matter. As treasurer, Greg is responsible for every dollar. Jennifer called the same day. The board just saw the financial records. 2 board members have called for an emergency meeting to remove Richard. The vote is tonight. I didn't attend, but Jennifer sent updates. 7:22 p.m. financial records presented. People are furious. $72,000 collected, only $12,000 spent. 7:48 p.m. motion to remove Richard. Vote. 89 yes, 31 no. He's out. 8:03 p.m. motion to remove Greg Foster. Vote. 95 yes, 25 no. He's out too. 8:15 p.m. new president elected, Jennifer Walsh. Needs 78% of vote. 8:30 p.m. board voted to stop defending lawsuit against you. We're settling, Jennifer called at 9 p.m. I'm now HOA president. That's not what I expected when I woke up today. Congratulations or condolences. Both, probably. She paused. James, I want to settle this. The board voted to drop our lawsuit and negotiate. You were right. Richard lied to us, stole from us, destroyed our reputation. We want to fix it. What are you proposing? We stop claiming your pool as community property. We pay your legal fees. We issue a formal apology. And we ask that you don't include the HOA itself in your lawsuit. Just Richard and Greg personally. Most of us are victims too. I'll talk to Marcus, but that sounds reasonable. Thank you, and James, I'm sorry. We should have questioned Richard's claims from the beginning. I sat on my patio after hanging up. The pool water reflected the evening sky, orange and pink from the sunset. Richard had tried to steal my pool. Instead, he'd lost his presidency, destroyed his reputation, and exposed his embezzlement. The new board wanted to settle and respect my property rights. Maybe, this was finally over. But Marcus's voice echoed from earlier. If they find evidence of embezzlement, Richard and Greg get arrested. I had a feeling the legal consequences were just beginning. I was drinking coffee on my patio Tuesday morning when I saw the police cars pull up to Richard's house across the street. 2 officers got out. They knocked on his door. Richard answered in his bathrobe, confused. I couldn't hear the conversation. But I saw the moment he understood what was happening. His face went pale. The officers turned him around, put his hands behind his back, and cuffed him. They walked him to the patrol car in his bathrobe and slippers while neighbors came out to watch. Richard saw me as they loaded him into the car. Our eyes met across the street. He looked broken. the man who'd spent months claiming my pool as community property, now being arrested for stealing $72,000 from the people he'd promised to serve. The patrol car drove away. A second car arrived at Greg Foster's house 5 minutes later. Same process: knock, conversation, handcuffs, patrol car. The HOA president and treasurer arrested on the same morning for embezzlement and fraud. Jennifer called me at 8 a.m. "Did you see? I watched from my patio." The prosecutor charged them both. "Oh, Richard faces 3 to 5 years. Greg might get probation if he cooperates, but his attorney fees alone will bankrupt him." "Good. Let me explain how we got here." This was Tuesday morning, 1 week after Richard had been removed as HOA president. That week had been the worst of the entire conflict. 3 days after losing the presidency, Richard had filed a personal lawsuit against me for $100,000, claiming I'd tortiously interfered with community property rights. Judge Morrison had dismissed it within hours, calling it frivolous and vexatious. That night, I'd found graffiti spray painted on my fence: selfish and community thief. The cameras caught Richard doing it at 2:17 a.m. The next morning, someone had dumped bleach in my pool, not enough to hurt anyone, but enough to kill the chemical balance and damage the saltwater system. $3,000 in repairs. The cameras caught Richard again, 4:35 a.m., pouring 2 gallons of bleach into the pool, then leaving. I'd called the police. They'd arrested Richard and issued a restraining order: stay at least 500 feet from my property. He violated it the next day. I was swimming laps at 6 a.m. when I heard screaming from my property line. Richard stood at the fence, screaming about stolen community assets and selfish property hoarders. The ankle monitor from the restraining order violation was visible on his leg. I called the police. Richard was arrested again, spent another night in jail, and was released with a court warning. One more violation, and he'd be held without bail until trial. The next night, my security cameras caught Richard trying to drain my pool again. He climbed over the fence at 3 a.m., but the new locks I'd installed on the drainage valves stopped him. He spent 20 minutes trying different tools before giving up. That's when Marcus had called, with news about the criminal investigation. The county prosecutor has been building a case. They've reviewed all the financial records, the emails, the marketing materials. They're charging Richard with embezzlement, fraud, theft by deception, and conspiracy. Greg gets the same charges minus conspiracy. They think he was negligent, not actively plotting with Richard. How solid is the case? Extremely. As they have emails from 2020 showing Richard conspiring with the developer to include your property in marketing materials as a future community pool. He knew it was fraud from the beginning. He collected $72,000 from homeowners for pool maintenance on a pool he didn't own, spent $12,000 and can't account for $60,000. The prosecutor called it one of the most brazen HOA fraud cases he's ever seen. When do they arrest? Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., I wanted you to know. Which is how I ended up watching Richard get arrested from my patio while drinking coffee. The settlement signing happened Thursday afternoon at the HOA Community Center. Jennifer, 3 board members, Marcus and I, sat around a conference table. Then Jennifer read the formal apology aloud. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA Board acknowledges that we had no legal rights to the pool at 487 Maple Road. We apologize for the trespassing, harassment, and legal costs we caused Mr. James Carter. We recognize his property rights and will never claim access to his property again. This apology is entered into the permanent HOA records and recorded with the county. She signed it. Each board member signed it. Marcus signed on my behalf. Jennifer slid a check across the table. $45,000. $33,000 for your attorney fees, she said. $12,000 for pool damage, repair costs, and your time. We're also recording a permanent covenant in the property record stating the HOA has no rights to your property. Not now, not ever. I looked at the check. 4 months of fighting, summed up in one payment. This should have been settled 4 months ago, Jennifer said quietly. Before Richard stole from us, before he destroyed our community's reputation. I'm sorry it took this long. Thank you for doing the right thing. We shook hands. The settlement was signed, notarized, and filed with the court that afternoon. The lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice, meaning the HOA could never file again. Richard's criminal trial started 6 weeks later. I testified on day 2. The prosecutor walked me through the timeline, discovering the fence, the contempt violations, the pool party, the graffiti, the bleach, the restraining order violations. The jury watched video after video of Richard trespassing, vandalizing, harassing. Richard's defense attorney tried to argue diminished capacity. My client became obsessed with the pool to the point of irrationality. He needs mental health treatment, not prison. The prosecutor's rebuttal was devastating. Mr. Klein wasn't irrational. He was criminal. He conspired with a developer in 2020 to defraud homebuyers. He collected $72,000 in fees for a pool he didn't own. He spent that money on his personal properties and pocketed the rest. When his fraud was exposed, he escalated to vandalism and stalking. This wasn't mental illness. This was greed and entitlement. The jury deliberated 4 hours. Verdict: guilty on all counts. Judge Morrison sentenced Richard to 4 years in prison and ordered full restitution. $60,000 to the HOA for the embezzled funds, $12,000 to me for damages, and $33,000 for my attorney fees. Richard stood there as the sentence was read, his face blank. 4 years in prison, his reputation destroyed, his property likely to be foreclosed to pay restitution. Everything lost because he couldn't accept that my pool wasn't his. Greg Foster took a plea deal, 2 years probation, $20,000 restitution to the HOA for negligently approving fraudulent transactions, and permanent ban from serving on any HOA board. He lost his treasurer position but avoided prison. 2 weeks after Richard's sentencing, Jennifer knocked on my fence gate while I was swimming laps. "Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to update you. We've recovered $18,000 from Richard's accounts. We're refunding the fraudulent pool fees to every homeowner who paid them." I climbed out of the pool. "That's good. And we're implementing new financial controls. 2 board members must approve any expenditure over $500. Monthly financial reports to all homeowners. Full transparency. We're rebuilding trust." Sounds like you're fixing what Richard broke. Trying to. It'll take years. But at least now everyone understands. You can't claim someone else's property just because you can see it. She paused. "The community wants you to know we respect your boundaries. No one will bother you about the pool again." I appreciate that. 6 months after the fence first appeared around my pool, I was floating on my back at sunset. The water was perfect. 72 degrees, perfectly balanced chemistry, LED lights glowing beneath the surface in shades of blue and turquoise. The pool I'd saved 6 months to afford. The pool I'd designed myself. The pool I'd fought 4 months to defend. Still mine, still beautiful. Richard was in prison, serving a 4-year sentence. Old Greg was on probation. Jennifer's board had paid my legal fees and issued a formal apology. The property records permanently stated the HOA had no rights to my property. Most importantly, I could swim in my own pool without worrying about Richard climbing my fence, draining it, vandalizing it, or organizing mass trespasses. The boundaries were clear, the fight was over, and I'd won. Not by destroying what Richard wanted, by keeping it, by defending it, by proving that property rights matter more than someone else's desire for access. I took another lap across the pool, the evening sun casting long shadows across the water. My pool, my property, my victory. Richard had tried to steal my pool by putting it on a fraudulent master plan, fencing it off, and claiming visibility equals ownership. Where he'd collected $72,000 from neighbors by promising access to property he didn't own. He'd violated court orders, vandalized my property, and harassed me for months. And he'd lost everything. Sometimes you don't have to destroy something to save it. Sometimes you just have to refuse to give it up. 1 year after Richard went to prison, I received a letter from him. It arrived in a plain envelope with a Colorado Department of Corrections return address. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten. It started with 2 words: "I'm sorry." I sat on my patio and read it twice. I'm writing this from a prison cell where I have a lot of time to think about what I did. You were right. The pool was always yours. I convinced myself that wanting something gave me the right to take it. I was wrong. I destroyed my marriage. I lost my properties. I stole from my neighbors. I went to prison. all because I couldn't accept that your pool wasn't mine. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what you tried to tell me from the beginning. Property rights aren't negotiable, no matter how badly someone wants what you have. I hope you're still swimming in your pool. It's yours. It was always yours. I'm sorry I tried to take it from you. Richard Klein. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I never responded. Richard had spent a year in prison learning what I'd tried to teach him in the first 5 minutes. You can't claim someone else's property just because you can see it from your window. Better late than never, I guess. The settlement money, $45,000, had covered my legal fees with $12,000 left over. I'd used it to upgrade the pool, new heating system, automated cover, improved LED lighting. The pool Richard had tried to steal was now better than ever. But the real improvement was peace. I could swim without checking cameras every 5 minutes. I could leave for work without worrying about coming home to 50 trespassers. I could float at sunset without waiting for the next crisis. For the first time in a year, my property felt like mine again. Jennifer and I had become something close to friends over the year. Not close friends, I still valued my privacy, but friendly neighbors. She'd knock on my gate occasionally to update me on HOA matters, always respectful of boundaries. Now, we recovered another $12,000 from Richard's assets, she told me one Saturday morning. We're distributing it to the homeowners who lost the most. Mrs. Chen on Birch Lane paid $600 in pool fees over 12 months. She's 73 on a fixed income. Getting that money back matters to her. That's good. Richard didn't just steal from the HOA generally. He stole from specific people, retirees, young families, people who trusted him. Seeing them get their money back, it helps. I thought about Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman I'd seen at the pool party a year ago. She'd probably believed Richard when he'd promised community pool access. She'd paid her $50 per month thinking she was investing in her community, and Richard had stolen it. How is the community doing? I asked. Better. We passed financial transparency rules. A dual approval for all expenditures, monthly reports, full audit twice a year. We'll never have another Richard. You hope, she smiled sadly. We hope. Greg Foster's probation had been revoked 6 months into his sentence. The forensic audit Jennifer commissioned found evidence Greg was actively stealing alongside Richard, not just negligently approving transactions. The prosecutor refiled charges. Greg went to trial, was convicted, and was now serving 3 years in the same prison as Richard. His wife had divorced him. His house was in foreclosure. 2 men who'd conspired to steal from their neighbors, now cellmates in the consequences. The homeowners who'd participated in the pool party had sent apology letters. Most were generic. Sorry for trespassing, we didn't know. But a few were personal. Tom Walsh, Jennifer's husband. Had written, I was one of the people at the pool party. In retrospect, that was incredibly stupid. We'd been told by Richard that you were being unreasonable, that the pool was community property, that we had rights. We believed him because he was our president. We should have questioned him. I'm sorry. I'd written back, apology accepted. You were lied to by someone you trusted. I understand. That was 6 months ago. Last week, Tom had knocked on my fence while I was swimming. My son is doing a school project on property rights. Would you be willing to talk to him for 5 minutes about what happened? I'd said yes. Tom's 10-year-old son asked thoughtful questions. Why couldn't the HOA use your pool if everyone wanted to? What's the difference between private property and community property? Did Mr. I.E. Klein really think he could steal your pool? I'd answered honestly. The kid took notes. 2 weeks later, Tom brought me a copy of the finished project. Why Property Rights Matter, the Meadowbrook pool case. His son had gotten an A. I'd heard through Jennifer that Richard's adult daughter had stopped visiting him in prison after the first month. She'd written him a letter. Jennifer had seen a copy when Richard's ex-wife shared it during the HOA's victim impact statement. The daughter's letter. Dad, I defended you for months. I told my friends you were right, that the pool should be community property, that the owner was being selfish. Then I saw the financial records. You stole $87,000 from your neighbors while lecturing them about community values. You lied to me. You lied to everyone. I don't know who you are anymore. Don't contact me. Richard had lost more than property and freedom. He'd lost his family. 1 year to the day after I'd found the fence around my pool, I was floating on my back at sunset. The water was 74 degrees. The LED lights glowed blue beneath me. The automated cover was rolled back, revealing clear sky. My pool, still mine, still beautiful. I thought about Richard's letter, the apology that came a year too late, his claim that he finally understood property rights weren't negotiable. Maybe he did. Maybe prison had taught him what the courts couldn't. Or maybe he was just sorry he'd been caught. It didn't matter anymore. The fight was over. The boundaries were clear. The legal precedent was set. Jennifer had asked me last week if I regretted not just accepting Richard's fence that first morning. Would it have been easier to just let the community use the pool? Easier? Maybe. But it would have taught the wrong lesson, that property rights don't matter if enough people want something. That majority desire trumps legal ownership, that you can take what isn't yours if you claim it loudly enough. And now the community learned that property rights matter more than promises. Richard learned that wanting something doesn't give you the right to take it, and I learned that sometimes the hardest fight is the most important one. I took one more lap across the pool, then climbed out as the sun dipped below the horizon. My property, my boundaries, my peace, worth every moment of the fight. 2 years after Richard went to prison, Jennifer knocked on my gate with unexpected news. Preston Homes is being sued. The homeowners who bought properties in the 2021 and 2022, 47 families, just filed a class action for fraudulent marketing. They want you to testify. I'd been floating in my pool when she arrived, enjoying a quiet Saturday afternoon. The last thing I wanted was to be dragged back into legal proceedings. Testify about what? The master plan. The marketing materials Preston Homes used when they sold these houses showed your pool as a future community amenity. They're claiming Preston knowingly defrauded buyers by promising pool access to property they didn't own. Marcus had mentioned this possibility a year ago, but I'd assumed it would settle quietly. Apparently not. What do they need from me? Your testimony that you never gave permission for your property to be shown as a community amenity. That Preston filed the fraudulent master plan without your knowledge. That the pool didn't even exist when they were marketing it as future community pool. I thought about the timeline. Preston Homes had filed the master plan in March 2021, showing the blue rectangle on my property labeled community pool. I didn't buy the property until June 2023. I didn't build the pool until summer 2024. Preston had been selling homes based on a pool that didn't exist on property they didn't own. When's the deposition? Next Tuesday. The attorney representing the homeowners is Sarah Chen. She's sharp. This should be straightforward. The deposition took place in Sarah Chen's downtown office. She was in her 40s, professional, prepared. Mr. Carter, when did you first learn that Preston Homes had filed a master plan showing your property as community pool space? August 2024. When my attorney reviewed county records during our case against the HOA. Did you give Preston Homes permission to include your property in their master plan? No, I didn't own the property when they filed the plan in March 2021. I bought it in June 2023. Did Preston Homes ever contact you after you purchased the property to discuss community access? Never. Were you aware that Preston Homes was marketing houses in Meadowbrook with promises of community pool access, while showing photos that appeared to depict your pool? Not until the lawsuit. I didn't even know Meadowbrook existed when I bought my property. Sarah showed me Preston Homes' 2021 marketing brochure. There was an aerial rendering showing the development with a blue pool clearly visible on what I now recognized as my property location. The caption read, "Future community amenities include clubhouse, walking trails, and resort-style pool." This rendering shows a pool on your property 3 years before you built it. Did Preston Homes have any basis to believe this pool would be built or accessible to residents? None. They didn't own my property. They couldn't have known I'd build a pool there. This is completely fabricated. The deposition lasted 90 minutes. Sarah was building a case that Preston Homes had engaged in systematic fraud, promising amenities they couldn't deliver, using property they didn't own, creating expectations they had no intention of fulfilling. 3 months later, Marcus called with an update. Nice Preston Homes settled. $1.6 million distributed among the 47 plaintiff households, about $34,000 per family. They didn't fight it. They couldn't. The evidence was overwhelming. The fraudulent master plan, the marketing materials showing your property, the fact that multiple Preston developments used the same tactic, showing private property as community amenities. The Attorney General opened a criminal investigation into the company. What happens to Preston Homes? They're dissolving. The settlement, combined with 3 other class actions in different developments, bankrupted them. The principals are facing potential criminal charges for consumer fraud. Richard had conspired with Preston Homes to defraud both me and the Meadowbrook homeowners. Now, Preston was paying the price, but the consequences kept rippling outward. The Colorado State Legislature had been watching the case. Representative Karen Mitchell contacted me 6 months after the Preston settlement. Mr. Carter, we're drafting legislation to prevent what happened to you from happening to other property owners. Oh, we'd like your input. The proposed HOA Transparency and Property Rights Protection Act included master plan verification. Any master plan filed by developers must include notarized consent from all property owners whose land is depicted, financial transparency. All HOA financial records must be available online to members within 30 days. Dual authorization. No single HOA officer can approve expenditures over $1,000. Mandatory audits. HOAs with budgets over $100,000 must conduct annual independent audits. Property rights notice. HOAs must provide annual notice to members of their property boundaries and clarification that HOAs cannot claim private property through master plans. Will this actually pass? I asked Representative Mitchell. It already has committee approval. We're voting next month. Your case exposed a gap in the law. Developers could file master plans showing property they didn't own. HOA officers could embezzle without oversight, and homeowners had no transparency. This bill closes those gaps. The bill passed unanimously. The governor signed it 8 weeks later. My attorney Marcus called it the pool case law, legislation that grew directly from Richard's fraud. But personally, the most meaningful change was closer to home. Jennifer had served as HOA president for 2 years after Richard's removal. She'd implemented the financial reforms, overseen the refunds, rebuilt community trust. Last month, she'd knocked on my gate with different news. I'm stepping down as president. Tom and I are moving. He got a job transfer to Oregon. But I wanted to thank you before we left. For what? For not giving up. Most people would have accepted Richard's fence or settled early, or just let it go to avoid conflict. You fought. And because you fought, we discovered Richard was stealing from us. 47 families got restitution from Preston Homes. The state passed legislation protecting property rights. You changed things. I was just defending my property. You were. But in doing that, you protected all of us. So, thank you. After Jennifer left, I thought about the previous 2 years. Richard in prison, Greg in prison, Preston Homes dissolved, legislation passed, community reformed. One fence around one pool had exposed fraud that reached from HOA embezzlement to developer conspiracy to legislative gaps. But for me, the real victory was simpler. I was swimming in my pool on my property with clear boundaries and legal certainty. That sometimes defending what's yours protects more than just yourself. 3 years after the fence first appeared around my pool, I was floating on my back, watching clouds drift across a clear blue sky. Same pool, same property. But everything felt different. The legal battles were over. Richard had served his sentence and been released 6 months ago. I'd heard through Jennifer, who still emailed occasionally from Oregon, that he'd moved to Arizona to be near his daughter, though apparently she still wasn't speaking to him. I didn't think about Richard much anymore. He'd become irrelevant the moment the judge signed the final order 3 years ago. The settlement money, $45,000, had covered my legal fees with about $15,000 remaining. I'd used it practically, upgraded the pool's heating system so I could swim year-round. I had added some mature trees along the eastern boundary for natural privacy screening and repaired the fence damage from Richard's original installation. The pool looked almost exactly as it had before the fence appeared, except now it was unquestionably, legally, permanently mine. David Morton, the new HOA president, had knocked on my gate a few months after taking over from Jennifer. Mr. Carter, I wanted to introduce myself. I took over as president when Jennifer moved. I want you to know the board is committed to respecting your property boundaries. No claims, no requests, no issues. We learned from what happened with Richard. I appreciate that. The community has changed a lot. We have financial transparency now. Every transaction posted online within 48 hours. Dual approval for everything over $500. Annual independent audits. We take governance seriously now. That's good to hear. I also wanted to tell you that several families who participated in the pool party 3 years ago have asked me to pass along their apologies again. They were lied to by Richard. They feel terrible about what happened. I understand. They were victims too. David had respected my boundaries completely since then. No requests for access, no suggestions about community use. The HOA stayed on their property. I stayed on mine, and the relationship was exactly what it should be, non-existent. Tom Walsh's son, the kid who'd done the school project on property rights 2 years ago, was now in middle school. Tom had told me last month that his son still remembered our conversation and had written another paper about the importance of respecting boundaries. The kid wanted to be a lawyer. Maybe something good had come from the mess after all. Mrs. Chen, the 73-year-old retiree who'd lost $600 to Richard's fake pool fees, had gotten every penny back through restitution. Jennifer told me Mrs. Chen had framed the restitution check alongside a photo of my pool with a caption. This was never ours, and that's okay. The Meadowbrook community had genuinely learned from Richard's fraud. They'd reformed their governance, refunded their members, and moved forward with humility. My life had returned to the quiet routine I'd always wanted. I worked from home 3 days a week. I swam every morning and most evenings. I maintained my property, paid my taxes, and enjoyed the peace I'd fought so hard to preserve. Last week, Marcus had called with final news. The state auditor completed a review of HOAs across Colorado. They found 12 other cases where developers had filed master plans showing private property as community amenities without owner permission. The legislation that passed after your case is forcing corrections on all of them. Are they suing? Most are settling. The precedent your case set made it clear. You can't claim property you don't own through master plans. The developers are paying restitution to avoid criminal charges. So the fight actually mattered. It mattered a lot. You could have accepted Richard's fence that first morning. Most people would have. But you fought, and in fighting you exposed fraud that went way beyond your pool. Property rights mean something again because you refused to let yours be violated. After Marcus hung up, I dove into the pool and swam 20 laps. The water was perfect, 74 degrees, crystal clear, reflecting the afternoon sun. This pool had cost me $80,000 to build and 18 months of legal hell to defend. But it was worth every dollar and every day. I thought about Richard's letter from 2 years ago, his apology, his claim that he finally understood property rights weren't negotiable. I'd filed it away and never responded because there was nothing to say. He'd learned his lesson the hard way. The community had learned theirs, and I'd learned mine. Sometimes the hardest fight is defending something that should never have been in question. Property rights, boundaries, rule of law, simple concepts, but worth defending. I climbed out of the pool as the sun began to set, casting orange and pink across the water. Same pool Richard had tried to claim 3 years ago. It's same property I'd defended against an HOA that thought wanting something gave them the right to take it. But now, peace, quiet, certainty, my property, my boundaries, my life. Exactly as it should be. 3 years ago, I'd woken up to find a fence around my pool and been told it was no longer mine. I'd fought through legal battles, contempt violations, trespassing incidents, and the exposure of massive fraud. And in the end, I'd kept what was always mine. Sometimes you don't have to destroy something to save it. Sometimes you just have to refuse to give it up.